Good morning, everyone. Before I begin the message, I want to ask God's blessing on our time together. Father, we thank you that you have blessed us with your love and your peace and your knowledge, and that we today can come before you in your presence. You are always with us, and just help us to be attuned to your voice, whatever it may be saying to us today, to delight in it, to be receptive to it, humble before it. And God, we praise you and just commit this time together, this message, for your glory in every way. In Jesus' name. Most Christian churches that I've visited or been a part of, or even maybe Googled on the internet, if we look closely enough, they will have what is called a statement of beliefs. And that's, it can be a little summarized on one little sheet with 10 or 15 or 20 basic statements of what they believe about God, their doctrines, their basic understanding of theology as revealed in the Bible. And of course, Grace Communion International has a little booklet also, which summarizes our beliefs, called Statement of Beliefs. And in this little pamphlet, there's about 15 or 20 different beliefs, things that we believe about God and that we feel that God has led us into and that we need to observe and understand if we're to worship him properly. Now you can also, although this booklet is like 15 pages long, it's the most briefest summary of what our beliefs are. I have a binder at home. It's probably a couple inches thick of these same beliefs, although they're greatly expanded. And of course, that again is just probably a tip of the iceberg of how those basic beliefs can be even more expanded. But I want to just read one little sentence or two from the Statement of Beliefs under the heading, The Triune God. And the Triune God, as we know, is three distinct persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And it says in the booklet, the one God may be known only in the three, and the three may be known only as the one true God, good, omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, and immutable in his covenant love for humanity. And so there we see described, in maybe somewhat strange sounding words in one sense, some of the characteristics that we believe and understand about God, the triune God. And I want to focus in on a couple of those descriptors. One is omniscient, which means God is all-knowing. He knows everything about us, about what's going on in the world. All knowledge is his. And he's also omnipresent. That is, he's present everywhere. These are they're basic in a sense as far as words as we explain them, but as far as their meaning and intent is just so wide and so high and so expansive that we can barely take it in. So I want to talk about those things today. Because sometimes our concept of God can be pretty limited. It's like a book I just started reading by Harold Kushner. He's written quite a few books, and I've covered most of them. I do appreciate some of the things he writes. This latest book is called 9 Essential Things I have learned about life. And in the second chapter of these 9 basic things that he's learned, he says, God is not a man who lives in the sky. Well, I wonder how many people really think of God in those terms. He's a man up in the sky. They think about maybe the painting that Michelangelo painted several hundred years ago, very famous, where God with a long gray beard, gray hair, heavily muscled arms is reaching down to create life, create Adam. And so sometimes that concept can be fixed in our mind as God as a human being. He has these limitations. Oh yeah, he's all mighty and everything, has all power, but we have this image and it can limit our concept of God in some ways. It may be Michelangelo's painting, of course, is beautiful art, but it may not be very good theology. So I want to take the time to cover these two concepts of God, basic and so expansive, as we'll see, that it's hard for us to even begin to contain them. Omniscience and omnipresence of God. I'm going to quote to begin with a book by J.I. Packer. It's called Knowing God. It's become a classic in Christian literature. He wrote this probably 50, 60 years ago, something like that. And it's well read, well known. And just this short paragraph he says about God. He says, "The true God is great because he is always with me and his eye is always upon me. Living becomes an awesome business when you realize that you spend every moment of your life in the sight and company of an omniscient and omnipresent creator." So this leads us into the text for the day, in which we will talk about these two aspects of God's character, which we heard in the reading in Psalms 139, verses 1 through 12. The first 6 verses actually talk about God's all-knowingness. He knows everything about us and what's going on in the world. And the last 6 verses, 7 through 12, talks about the fact that God is everywhere at the same time. David wrote this psalm. Psalm 139 is intended to be a song, actually, and it's also often being referred to as a song with strong theology, as we've already been referenced the two items of omniscience, and omnipresence. So I'm just going to read through verse by verse and try to expand on each one of these verses to help understand a little bit of the magnitude of what David is talking about here. David, who had such a close relationship with God, went through a lot of things with God. But one thing about David, he never minced his words. He spoke what was on his mind. He was totally sincere, totally dedicated, made mistakes, made errors, but his zealousness towards God is never questioned. Verse 1, it starts out and says, this is Psalms 139. "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me." Well, there's a lot of information packed in here. I'm going to occasionally refer to the New Living Translation to help support and maybe clarify a little bit as far as the reading and understanding of that of various verses. The New Living Translation, as far as verse 1, it says, "O Lord, you have examined my heart, and you know everything about me." That kind of simplifies it. When it says searched, the word search implies it's a term that's used in mining operations or exploring a country. It's a lot of detail implied in that searching. And as far as, say, the mining operation, years ago, not too many years ago, Nancy and I spent a few days up in the gold rush country in California, near Jamestown and that area. And some of these little towns have some of the original mining machinery still set up and apparently still able to be used to a certain degree. And one of the machines they have, which is quite impressive, it's called a stamping mill. It has a big wheel that's run by water to power it. You don't need electricity. And it's basically meant to pull out the minerals, gold especially, out of hard rock, that type of composite that it's working with. And the stamping, it means this heavy weight comes down on these rocks and just smashes them over and over until the gold comes out and it can be easily extracted a little more easily. Of course, also in mining operations is the panning for gold, and that's a very requires a lot of patience to do panning for gold, although it can be done on maybe larger scale than the hand panning that we picture, the little little pioneer man with his donkey next to him, and like we used to do at Knott's Berry Farm, pan for gold, I guess to some small degree. But again, it's very, very, the idea is both of these processes are very tedious, but the intention, of course, is to pull out the gold, because that's what you're looking for. You want to know what's really there, and that's how you find it. So God searches us that way, apparently, to that degree, so finite. He knows so much about us that we couldn't begin to imagine all that he knows about it. He knows more than we know, probably, about ourselves. And also the word search can be used in the situation of exploring a country. And think of the explorers that used to, at one time, hundreds of years ago in this country, came west from Tennessee and west to the Plain States and clear to the Pacific Ocean. What they had to go through and what they had to learn is they mapped the land as they went, every little detail, to help those who came later on. So it kind of gives us a little idea, just looking at that. When God says he searched us, it's a pretty finite, pretty detailed thought process that if we can imagine our own minds. And so he comes to really know us. I mean, that thought by itself is just hard to comprehend. We think we know people that are close to us. How much does God know us? By knowing that, even having that information, makes me appreciate my relationship with God. This opens the door for that relationship to bloom and to just share everything with him. 1 Chronicles 28:9 also says, the Lord searches every heart and understands every desire and every thought. I know a lot of people spend a lot of money going to therapists and counselors, and hours after hours trying to, maybe not deliberately wanting to share every thought and every desire, but that's part of the process, or part of the desire of the therapist, is to bring out everything that's in this person so they can possibly help them, give them some direction. So talk about a counselor who can help us, a therapist. God is the best. He knows our hearts and understands every desire and every thought. So we pray to God. We know that he's going to take into consideration all my thoughts, all my desires, all that's really important in my life. The second verse, verse 2. In the NIV, it says, you know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. The New Living Translation says, you know when I sit down and stand up. You know my thoughts even when I'm far away. So God knows my schedule. He knows what time I get up, time I go to bed. And he's familiar with that. He could probably put it on a schedule out in advance, far of my schedule, because he knows better what's going to happen than I do. Very familiar with all my ways, all my thoughts, all my plans. Think of somebody else who could read thoughts from afar. Jesus, right? Remember his disciples one time? They were arguing about who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom. Jesus wasn't, I don't know how far away he was from, but obviously wasn't in earshot. I don't exact all the circumstances, and I didn't look into that, but we knew that he didn't really hear what they were saying. But later on, he asked them, what are you guys talking about? He knew what they were talking about. He wasn't trying to trick them or show what a great perception he had, but he knew what they were talking about. He wanted to use this as a learning opportunity for them. And of course, he brought a little child in the midst of them and says, you want to be great? Here is how you do it. And so he continued to give some instruction on what greatness is really all about, like being a little child. So obviously, Jesus had that ability to read minds, to know thoughts. He limited physically as a human being at that time, but he had this aspect of God's mind, God's spirit, to read minds and to know every thought and plans of of those around him. Verse 3 says, "You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways." And the New Living Translation says, "You see me when I travel. You know when I rest at home. You know everything that I do." So here David is continuing to expand on this concept that God knows everything about us, what we're doing, where we're going, what our desires, thoughts are. He knows when we take a trip and when we're staying at home. He's very familiar with all our ways because he spends a lot of time with us because he's right next to us all the time, which will go into the second part of God knowing exactly where we are, and he's with us at all times. Discern, the word discern, he says, "You discern my going out and my lying down." Actually, other translations have it comprehended. Another one translation has it scrutinized. So you understand why I do what I do, is what it's saying. You discern, you comprehend, you understand it. And the same word discern, as it's being translated here as discern, is also tended to be used as like a hunter stalking his prey, or a soldier besieging an enemy. Now, stalking his prey, that's anyone's ever been a hunter, especially let's say a bow hunter with bow and arrows, not with a rifle with a scope you can see 3 miles away or whatever, and makes it a whole lot easier. But a person who's stalking an animal and has to get as close as possible learns the habits of the animal, learns to observe the signs where if that animal's been here and where it is and how to be in a position where their scent isn't detected by the animal. A lot of understanding goes into being able to stalk an animal and understand its ways. Well, God understands our ways better than we can possibly understand the ways of an animal and stalking it. And a soldier besieging a city, that term is also used as a translation for discern. When an army or soldiers are besieging or planning to take over an enemy encampment or town, they have to understand, observe all the way around that town. What is going on? What are who's guarding it? What's the protection that we're going to have to be concerned about? So again, that just helps elaborate a little bit how much God discerns us and knows everything about us. Psalms 119, 168 says, "All my ways are before you." This is again David saying, "All my ways are before you." So David understood that. I mean, he's speaking from a lifetime of experience, knowing God and realizing how much God knows about him. Verse 4 says, "Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely." And the New Living Translation says, "You know what I'm going to say even before I say it, Lord." Anyone have that experience with anyone close to them? Like my wife does? We tend to finish each other's thoughts sometimes, sentences, and something comes up, a subject, a song, or something on the TV or whatever, in a book we read. We start thinking about it, and we're ready to say something about that. I'll say it, and my wife will say, "Wait a minute, I was thinking the same thing." So that's a great joy to have in a relationship, to be able to be that close and that compatible, that we can understand what the other is thinking a lot of times, finish their sentences, or unfortunately, not everybody has that kind of a relationship, but I think the ideal relationship is where we can have that camaraderie, that ability to share thoughts and ideas, likes and dislikes, even longtime friends, someone you've been a friend with a long time, maybe traveled with, been with through high times and low times, tough times, and good times. We learn to know how the person will react under different circumstances, and you appreciate it, and you're just so compatible. Well, that's the way God is, even beyond, what we can ever think about the human relationship. God is that way to us, even so much more so that it's hard to comprehend. Verse 5 in Psalms 139 says, "You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me." Let's see what the New Living Translation says. "You go before me and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head." Hem me in. Other translations use the word hedged. You've hedged me in. That's the New King James Version. Other translations will have it. You've besieged me. Again, like besieging a town, like I mentioned. He's got me surrounded. And it's not in a negative sense. Because when it says you lay your hand upon me, it's a hand of blessing, actually, of protection. Think of this. One of the first thoughts that came to my mind trying to conceive this idea of God before me and after me is driving down the freeway. I'm constantly looking in my rearview mirror because I want to know what's going on behind me. People do a lot of crazy stuff. They're right on your tail, there's a semi ready to push off or whatever, cars are going to pass. So I'm constantly using that rearview mirror. In addition, trying to pay attention to what's ahead of me. Well, to think about, I thought, well, maybe God's like that. He's in front of me. He's driving this big whatever tractor or something, clearing the way for me. I can't see him, and he's behind me, protecting me from whatever may happen from behind and aside, both sides as well, because he's all around us. That's a great deal. It gives a great deal of peace, I know, to me when I think about God being that way to us, every one of us. Just pick one here or there. Those who submit to God, who call him his God, that's where he is. He's right with us, providing that protection, that closeness. Like I said, he's in front of us, back of us, on a freeway, in a dark street, wherever it is. God's not off somewhere else tending to other business. He's right there with us. And verse 6, "Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain." That's what David's saying. And basically, the New Living Translation says the same. "Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too great for me to understand." And that's what actually is implied here, the word wonderful. And many other translations may use the word impossible or unattainable. It's like I can put a label on this concept of God knowing every thought and being with me in every circumstance, but I can't really contain it. I really can't fully comprehend what this means. He says it's impossible to attain that. And I think of the term we used some of us may have used back in the 1960s when we were young and cool and everything. We'd say, "Far out, man. That is far out." Yeah, that thought, that concept is really beyond. Even if you take street drugs, LSD or whatever it was they were taking at that time, and maybe still take today, to try to reach a higher level of consciousness, you're not going to attain the ability to understand what David was saying here, but he was trying to understand. It's too wonderful. How can you can't describe it. You can't physics, theoretical physics, or whatever you want to call it, can't describe the ability to know the thoughts of every person and all the things we read in these first 6 verses. So just think about this for a while. Maybe for the next 10 years, 20 years, the rest of our lives, what that really means. I think that's what David was saying. It's too wonderful. I'm glad God can do that. I don't know how he does it, how it works. Can't explain it, but it is. What a blessing that is. So we finished the first 6 verses talking about God's ability to know everything about us, all our thoughts, no matter where we are. We go into the next section where we talk about God's omnipresence. That he is present wherever we are at any time in our lives. Verse 7 says, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? I want to quote from another little book. I have lots of books and I like to read and quote. One is A.W. Tozer, The Pursuit of God. This is really becoming a classic as well. It was written back about 1948, a little over 100 pages, and it is used and quoted from extensively, probably in messages like this or in various studies about God. Pretty easy to understand. It's not too technical. It's pretty good basic language. And what he says in this book, The Pursuit of God, he has a chapter called The Universal Presence. The universal presence of God. And here he says very simply here, I kind of summarize it, shorten the sentences a little bit, but this is what he's saying. Wherever we are, God is here. There can be no place where he is not. No point is nearer to God than any other point. No one is, regarding distance, any further from or any nearer to God than any other person. Now, talk about a concept that's hard for us as physical, limited human beings. That's one. Now, lest some like to take this and expand it into what is called pantheism, that God is in everything. He's in the leaves and the rocks and the dirt and everything else. No, that's a different concept. God is everywhere. He's spirit, which we can only put labels on to try to describe in our puny physical brains. Acts 17, 27, 28 also talks about this concept. When Paul had met with the Athenians, he saw all the idols they had erected, and of course the Greeks, they just love to talk about all the different concepts and philosophies of the various gods for different things. And so Paul, he was not one to shy away from a little bit of a argument or an opportunity to share the gospel. So he came into their midst, and of course he saw apparently the one idol that was set up, or one stone that was set up. It said, to the unknown God. And of course he said, okay, I'm here. I'm going to talk to you about the unknown God, the one you're missing the point with all the rest of this. And in just briefly describing that God, he says, he is not far from each of us. He is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and exist. I mean, that's pretty comprehensive when talking about this God, the true God, not their gods, which have limited capacities and purposes. And Paul goes on in Romans 8, 38 to 39 to talk about this concept as well as God being everywhere, but also in a relationship to his love. He says, for I am convinced that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is Christ Jesus, our Lord. Yep, there's no place that can separate us from God and from his love. Verse 8, if I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depth, you are there. And the New Living Translation says, if I go up to heaven, you are there. If I go down to the grave, you are there. And that translation, grave for depth, is an accurate translation because it comes from the original word Sheol, which is the Hebrew word for grave, depth. So it's just a place where the flesh ends up physically. But God is he never leaves us. He's there with us wherever we are. He's concerned about everything in our lives. Jeremiah 23:24 says, along the same idea of maybe trying to be in a place where God can't see us, won't know about us. It says, can I hide myself in secret places so I cannot see him, says the Lord? He says, can anyone hide himself in secret places? so I cannot see him. And God says, Lord says, do I not fill the heaven and the earth? Wow. Just think about that statement. He fills heaven and earth. All that is, God is there. I'll take a brief break here before I finish the last few verses, talking about God's ability to be wherever we are, always present. There's about this point about God always being near us. There was a short message, not sure if it came out in the form of an email or a letter that maybe Tony forwarded to me. It was a message from our church president, Greg Williams. And it was a few months ago, actually, I received this message. And it's an interesting concept about God being wherever we are. He says, in my various travels, this is Greg Williams, our president speaking, I hear a wide array of prayers from our GCI family. We are without a doubt a praying church, yet some of the shorthand expressions I hear are a bit confusing. I like that term, shorthand expressions. Sometimes they're a bit confusing. Here is one example. This is something that's used in maybe opening prayer or before a service begins. He says, Lord, please be present in our meeting. Now, I think I probably have used that. Maybe most of us have used it at one time or another. And it's not, like you said, he's not trying to be critical. There's nothing bad. He says the Holy Spirit is able to clean up some of the things that we say because our intentions are right. But he's trying to help us to be a little more accurate in even our prayers. So when we say, Lord, be present in our meeting, he goes on to say, the sense here is that we come across as inducing God to do something he may not be inclined to do. Asking God to be here because you're out there someplace else. Within the omnipresent nature of the triune God, we know that there is no place where we are not in his presence. Therefore, it is more appropriate to pray for our heightened awareness of the Lord's presence and to express gratitude in knowing he will never leave or forsake us. A better phrase for a prayer of invocation would be, Father and Son, we welcome your Spirit to be at work in us and among us. God is there. We have to be tuned in to what God is saying and doing. He's waiting for us to do our part. He's already there. He's waiting for us. What's our response going to be? There's a story. I don't know whether it's true or not. I've seen it in various places. There may be some accuracy to it. Maybe it's just someone made up as a good example to illustrate something. But there were these two men walking downtown New York City. They could be in Manhattan. If anyone's been there, you can picture what that's like, walking down during the busy time of day. I've done that a long time ago. A lot of stuff going on, a lot of noise, traffic, sirens, thousands of people walking back and forth, just noise, pretty high decibels at some times. All of a sudden, the one man stops and says, I hear a cricket. The other man says, you must be crazy. There's noise, there's sirens. There's no way in the world you can hear a cricket. I hear a cricket, he said. So, okay, they walk down to the corner of the street, stop, go across the street, over to a place where there's some buildings and some large planters that have bushes, flowers, maybe a tree. And he starts rummaging around in the leaves and so forth in the shrubbery, and he pulls out a cricket. And so the man says, it's not that my hearing is any better than yours. It's all a matter of what are we listening for. And he says, let me illustrate. So he reaches in his pocket, pulls out a handful of coins, drops it on the sidewalk. And all of a sudden, all the heads within close by turn and watch to see what was that noise. Well, they probably knew it was a lot of money being dropped on or at least coins being dropped on. So he said, see, it's all a matter, what are we listening for? Are we listening for God? Or are we distracted by the world around us? C.S. Lewis I think, summed it pretty well. This is a pretty well-known example that he has used. He says, God whispers to us in our joys. He speaks to us in our conscience. And he shouts to us in our pain. Well, okay, he whispers in our joys, but we can't hear him because the party is going full steam. The music is loud. We're celebrating. We're whatever we're doing, we can't hear that little whisper voice. Too much going on, too much noise. Yet times are good. He speaks to us in our conscience. Well, okay, the party's not going now. He's trying to talk to me in my mind, share things with me, or help get my attention. But we're busy. Got places to go, things to do. You ever ask anybody, how's your week? How are things going? Well, an answer probably to use more than anything else is, I'm really busy. I've said that, and I've heard other people say it as well. I'm really busy. That's our life. Well, maybe sometimes C.S. Lewis is implying here we're too busy to hear God speaking to us in a normal voice into our conscience. We haven't got time to do that. Leave that for some other time. And then when he says he shouts to us in our pain, well, that's where he usually finally gets our attention. Because now we're whatever that pain might be. Maybe it's a physical illness. Oh, God help me. Maybe it's a great financial loss. God help me. This is painful. Or it can be a pandemic. God help us. Finally getting our attention. But sadly, it still hasn't gotten a lot of people's attention because they still don't believe it. I'll stop there, lest I get into political ramifications. But the point is, what does it take to get our attention from God? Really listen to God. Verse 9 through 10, he says, if I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me, and your right hand will hold me fast. That's verses 9 and 10. So again, he's showing no matter where we are, what time we get up in the morning, and how far we go in the morning, how far our travel on the boat or on our bike or whatever it is, God is there. Or the far side of the sea, halfway around the world, God is there. His hand is there to guide me, tell me which way to go, which way to turn, and to protect me. Verses 11 through 12, then, to conclude this part of Psalms 139 says, if I say, surely darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. In other words, day and night are the same to God. Now, we used to play hide and seek as kids, and the best time to play, of course, was during the summertime when it got dark, because you'd have to wait a little bit longer before it really got dark, but it was kind of semi-dark when we would start, and it would get darker. We thought it would be easier to hide, and worked out pretty well a lot of times for kids, but then it wouldn't work with God, because he knows where we're hiding, or where we're at, or what the situation we're in, how dangerous it might be. And I want to go back again to Jeremiah 23:24, which I quoted before, but I think it also fits here. Can anyone hide himself in secret places so I cannot see him? Do I not fill the heaven and the earth, says the Lord? So wherever we are, hiding or not, God is there. Of course, in David's time, darkness was a little more, something he took a little more serious than maybe we do now, because it was a dangerous time to be out at night, street lights, car lights. But then he knew that God's hand was always there to protect me, to protect him. So that's two major concepts of God's power, his strength, his love. In 12 short verses, God knows everything about me. God is wherever I'm at any time. What a consoling, peaceful information that's beyond our understanding fully, but comforting to know that God is that with us, that way with us at all times. Now, I began thinking about this message or this topic about 2 weeks ago when I realized what the scriptures were that we were recommended to speak on, and this one on 139, it just caught my attention, so I started thinking about it and taking notes and praying about it and reading, and so whatever happened in those last couple of weeks, I was particularly attuned to something that was relevant to this topic. And it's amazing how much did pop out during that time once I directed my mind to this particular subject. As I've said before, we could probably I could spend the rest of my life trying to take all this in and apply it and see all the different circumstances that I may have missed what God knows about me and where He is in my presence and where I'm at that time when He is actually there with me. Even if I spent all this time, the rest of my life would probably come up with the same answer that David had, right? It's too wonderful for me. I can't grasp it all. But the important thing is we can grasp enough to know how blessed we are, to know that God cares that much about us, and His love is there wherever we are, whatever circumstance and whatever thought or anxiety that we're going through. Great deal of encouragement to me, and hopefully for you as well.